So I was talking about video game controversies in my last video, including that of Suicide Squad more specifically, and it looks like we're getting even more video game controversy today, because I came across an article that I found to be very interesting, and this is by IGN, The Witcher Remake devs, not afraid to remove aspects which are bad, outdated, and need to be remade. I know that reading a headline like this can raise a red flag in people's brains. It certainly did for mine, and I wanted to read a little bit more into it because I am a person that has played all three Witcher games. I played and beat the first Witcher game twice, once in 2008 and once 2 years ago. I also have clocked in about 150 hours into The Witcher 2, both on console and on PC, as well as The Witcher 3, which I have clocked probably about like 500 hours into on consoles and on PC. I've played a lot of The Witcher is basically what I'm trying to say. I know the game's strengths and weaknesses. I know how the games have improved over the years, and I agree that The Witcher 1 deserves and desperately needs a remake, because I think a lot of people who would go back after playing The Witcher 2 and 3 to play The Witcher 1 would find themselves sorely disappointed in the very poor graphics, the Neverwinter Nights style gameplay. I think they used the engine to make that game, and the combat in that game is really bad. But the story is phenomenal, of course, because it's The Witcher, you know, and you've got a semi-open world with main missions and side quests, all sorts of cool stuff. The Witcher Remake developer Fool's Theory isn't afraid to change aspects of CD Projekt Red's original, which are bad, outdated, and need to be remade. Speaking to Edge Magazine via Games Radar, Fool's Theory CEO Jacob Rakos, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, made clear not every part of 2007's The Witcher will appear in the highly anticipated remake, though didn't give any specifics as to what will and won't make the cut. Quote, "First and foremost, we need an honest, down-to-earth analysis of which parts are simply bad, outdated, and need to be remade," Rakos said. Fool's Theory will simultaneously be highlighting the parts that are great, should be retained, or are direct key pillars that can't be discarded. So when I see that, I think, okay, so they're going to keep the main story elements, right? But how many side quests are they going to remove? How many subplots are they going to remove to fit this vision that they have that apparently the original did not satisfy? Well, when you see the Witcher Enhanced Edition screenshots, which is an edition that I have, you've got stuff like this. I mean, when you play the game with the mouse and keyboard clicking combat, it feels really clunky. It doesn't connect right. I mean, it's really bad. I mean, they improved it big time in Witcher 2, and in 3, I think they did a really good job of refining it. But in Witcher 1, it's like a night and day difference. So I think that updating the engine is a really good idea. The original Witcher game is somewhat outdated in places by 2024 standards, perhaps headlined by its mouse and keyboard only support with matching combat, instead of controlling Geralt as players did in The Witcher 3, for example, with standard gamepad support. Combat involved clicking on enemies and timing subsequent attacks with almost rhythm game mechanics. And yeah, it was really frustrating too, because you can get used to those mechanics, but then it becomes a repetitive type of gameplay where you're just doing those same things over and over and over. There's no variety. And while that's happening, you're not really connecting. So I think that the combat really needs to be improved. I totally agree with a complete overhaul of the engine. They said that they're going to be using the tools that they're using for The Witcher 4 to make The Witcher Remake, which I'm actually pretty excited about. I'm not trying to write this game off, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm not going to assume right off the bat that they have some kind of modern audience agenda here or some kind of woke agenda. I mean, it's completely possible, but we haven't seen enough of the game yet to be able to make that observation, or at least I haven't personally. Its overall gameplay loop is largely similar to that of The Witcher 3. However, players generally follow a story beat into a new area and are presented with a handful of main quests to pursue. Side quests and monster contracts are also available, providing money and items used to upgrade abilities, equipment, and potions. So basically, it's an RPG. It's a very fun RPG with crappy combat and a horrible intro. Okay, but the game as a whole is awesome for a 2007 video game, especially for one that tries to be semi-open world like The Witcher. There's a lot of things in that game I'm actually worried that they're going to change. Those subplots that I was talking about, they have cool little triggers that are affected by the choices that you make in the game. And I think that's going to be a very important thing to not remove in this new remake. I mean, they really need to keep in these story triggers where all of these choices can affect the outcome of the entire world around you and the characters. That is a huge thing in the Witcher game. You would actually be surprised at how in-depth the character choices affect the story. It's pretty amazing. And I hope that they keep that in the game for, because that's what I thought was so special about The Witcher 1. But if you go over to the Gamer article here, where they're talking about how The Witcher remake will remove outdated parts of the original game, Rakos doesn't go into what's getting changed for obvious reasons, but the Gamer tries to make a few good guesses. Like they say here, for starters, the combat. Yes, I think we can all agree the combat is garbage, but you also have the rather blatant misogyny, they say. And okay, and I can't help but admit that I kind of rolled my eyes when I read this. Now, I think that an argument can be made for this specific point here. So it says, we all know that The Witcher is a very raunchy series, and some of the best scenes in The Witcher 3 come as a result of that. But Geralt collecting weird trading cards depicting the women that he sleeps with, like some kind of geeky little black book, has always seemed seedy. Or disreputable if you don't know what seedy means, and even more so by today's standards. Even Carol Kowalczyk, one of the minds behind the system, and if I recall correctly, she or he is no longer involved with CD Projekt Red. I think they left the company. Doesn't look back on its addition fondly. And I agree. So whenever you have a relationship encounter with a woman in the first game, you get a trading card. Now, some of them are okay, but then a few of the other ones are really lewd and really revealing. Some of them are kind of gross, if I'm being honest. I didn't personally care for the trading card aspect of the game where you're, collecting cards for every woman that you sleep with. It wasn't a big part of the game for me. I mostly ignored it. So I could totally see them removing this and it not affecting the game. I don't personally see how it could be applied to Geralt's personality. I always saw the trading card aspect of the game to just be an in-game function, but not really something that was canon to the story, like as if Geralt was really truly collecting these trading cards or creating them for every woman he slept with. That doesn't make any sense to me. But I can totally see why people want to remove it. If you take a look here, I mean, there was an article about this back in December 2022. How The Witcher's collectible sex cards turned romance into gotta catch them all. And this article goes into explain how these cards were originally intended to just, be informative, but I guess they kind of went too far. And some of the people who were involved in doing this, they kind of regret that it happened. The journalist Amy Hart reflected on the mechanic in an article for EGM in 2020. While The Witcher 3 does some excellent characterization with characters like Triss, Yennefer, and Ciri by allowing them to be fleshed out women instead of women who are closely linked to Geralt, the series started off on a particularly bad foot by gamifying sleeping with women by letting Geralt collect sex cards of the women he has conquered. It's since become a notorious mechanic and one that thankfully does not make a reappearance in the third game. Honestly, I think that if they didn't even talk about it, people probably wouldn't care about the trading cards. I can't imagine that there's a person out there who would fight to keep the game cards in there. I mean, if you're just staring at these cards all day, like, what are you playing The Witcher for, right? But the writer Lauren Morton, meanwhile, was a bit more forgiving in her retrospective for PC Gamer. She did acknowledge that it reduced the female characters to objects, but couldn't deny the satisfaction she experienced from trying to collect them all. All those people that are playing Pal World right now, they're getting all hyped up and they're like, dude, wait, more collecting? They're all getting fired up because they haven't felt that drive to collect Pokemon in forever, and now that game comes out. Maybe they'll be upset about this. Who knows? But quote, for my part, it's hard not to turn these romance cards into a game of gotta catch 'em all. They may reduce every woman in the game to a novelty item, but as a player, I can't deny how, just like every other kind of collectible, I immensely enjoy digging through a wiki to make sure I'm doing each quest properly. I don't want to miss one. I think that there's an easy solution to this. I mean, you could keep the trading cards in there, maybe ungamify them, just get rid of the whole trading card aspect of these things and just kind of make them like pages of information, just have the woman's picture on there after he succeeds in a relationship with them in the game. You don't have to have them looking all lewd. I mean, dude, there's a couple of cards in that game that just look outright demonic. And of course, it pertains to that personality of that female character in the game. You understand why it looks that way after like all these stories or these side quests are done, and you have a better understanding of who these women are. But I think that it's easily solvable. I think that if you just take away the lewd pictures, put normal pictures there, and just make them pages of information that kind of educate the player, I think that would be great. I think that people would still stick around. They probably wouldn't complain as much. I think changing the format, changing the layout of those things that Geralt quote unquote collects, I think that can be solved. I think a bigger issue is the gameplay and a couple of story elements that I find very questionable. including but not limited to Triss sexually assaulting Geralt when he's like under the influence in the game, which I think was a very poor story decision. I think it made a lot of people dislike Triss as a character, and they retconned that later in the future games. They don't really mention it. They kind of indirectly retcon it, or they kind of gloss over it and move on. Removing that scene, changing that around to, because I think that having her do that to Geralt, I think that was a very questionable thing for her to do. Okay, it's not like Geralt is just a misogynist in the Witcher game, just going around sleeping with everybody. There's a point in the game where he becomes, I can't remember exactly what happens. He falls under the influence of some kind of a drug or spell, or he's tired, I can't remember, and he's about to pass out. And while he's under the influence, Triss basically forces him against his will, okay, to have sex with her. It's a really disturbing scene personally. I think that there are definitely things that they could change in here that could make the game better. But let's not pretend that it's just Geralt going around sleeping with people, okay? Geralt is actually a rape victim in that game. So I think that an argument can be made for that scene to remove it. Speaking to Kowalczyk today, he maintains that the problem with the mechanics stems from the team simply getting carried away with adding them and failing to consider how the player would react to them. As a result, something that he argues began life as a potentially meaningful souvenir of Geralt's relationships in the game became shallow and collectible. Now, we also need to acknowledge that ESG is a huge thing right now. Studios want that ESG money. CD Projekt Red has not shied away from this. They have already made videos about their approach to ESG. It is completely possible that we could be seeing some changes, some modern audience changes in this game, but I'm not going to say that it's confirmed, and I'm not just going to assume that that's the case. I do think that people should look at these things objectively, think for themselves, and read and figure out if that's really what's going on, because I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are writing this game off right away, and they could be missing out on a potentially great video game. But we need to have these conversations so that we can make proper deductions on whether it's worthy of a purchase, because overall, the thing that people care most about is a good video game that plays well, that looks pretty good. Okay, it doesn't have to look great. I think there's already proof of that. Pal World does not look amazing, and yet millions of people have bought it. So think on that what you will. What are your thoughts on the Witcher remake and what they're planning on doing? Are you excited about it? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't had the chance to like and share this video with your friends, that would be awesome. And hey, if you're feeling ultra spicy, consider subscribing to my channel so that you're always up to date on what kind of thing I've got going on. I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Later. Meow, meow.